moment. On the other screen, you'll see that we have a very special guest, someone that we have worked with, not for long, for the last couple of months, let's say, but someone that we're extremely impressed with. He's based in the city of Białystok. And just before we came on air, we were having a chat about who Daniel is and what he does. But let me ask that question of Daniel. So this is Daniel Paczkowski, who's a genealogist. Good morning to you.
Good morning and good afternoon.
And good afternoon, and maybe it's the middle of the world of the night somewhere, so that's for sure. Daniel, can you tell us a little bit more about what you do? What is it that you do as part of your business?
I am the researcher and the genealogy tour guide. This is my business at the moment, the main and the only. But I've been the engineer for more than 20 years, working for a telecommunications company. And at the beginning, genealogy was my private passion. I was keen on my own rules and was doing it for, I've been doing it for about 17 years at the moment. After some time, I began to work after my main business as a tour guide. This was the second passion of mine. Mm-hmm. And after some time, I thought that mixing these two activities, genealogy research and tour guiding, could be a good experience. And this was the beginning of my business.
And I think with your engineering background, certainly one of the things that you do need to have as a skill is being very well organized, because I think genealogy, it's a bit like, you know, you need to investigate and you need to find information out, but you also have to be very logical about how you go about it. Would you say that's the case?
I think engineering helps in organizing the genealogical things, but also when you do your own genealogy research and you receive many data from different sources, if you don't organize it day by day, after some time you have a huge amount of data, you don't know what to do with it. So you have to be organized, you have to do it day by day, systematically. And the same is with the research. After some time you receive research cases from many people throughout the world. And you also have to organize your work in such a manner that everyone is satisfied with your work.
Doesn't get confused. So just going back to your own journey, Daniel, for a minute there, when you started, what prompted you, like what drove you to do research of your family, and also how far were you able to go? Like, what did you find? Is it several centuries that you've been able to go back to, or were you able to explore your family history to, you know, what kind of extent? Where did you get to with it?
Okay, so answering your first question, what prompted me to do the research? I think every one of us has such questions in mind, who we are and where we came from, what is our culture, etc., etc. But there should be such a moment when you start. The most important thing is to start, to begin. For me, it was a conversation with my grandmother. I visited her 17 years ago and asked her about her parents, her grandparents. I didn't know about them. And my grandmother had a very good memory and gave me the documents written in Russian from the beginning of 20th century. And I thought I should read it, should translate it, and should organize this data. After that, I purchased the book, Genealogy for the Beginners, very popular 20 years ago in Poland by Małgorzata Nowaczyk. And this book helped me organizing the data, which I began to search first through the family. So this was the beginning of my genealogy research activity. Can you remind me the second question?
So the second question, how far were you able to go? Because I think as you explained, when you first start, you never know where you're going to get to with it. So some people go further in time. Other people are able to explore the family history and find all kinds of branches that are still, perhaps immigrated or have been displaced somewhere. So I'm just wondering, where did you get to with your research? And maybe if you could tell us what other, maybe a couple of interesting things that you found that you didn't know that you could share with us.
Okay, first, my methodology is that I search generation by generation. So I began from my parents, then grandparents, and at the moment I am researching the generation of my great grandparents after 17 years. But if I have the possibility, for example, I have the vital records from given parish where my ancestors hailed from, I try to organize all the data which is possible. So for some lines, I have information from the half of 18th century. For most of the genealogists in Poland, this is kind of a limit, because if you have the your ancestors were peasants, so didn't have any ownerships or possessions before the time when they were freed. The only information you can find in 18th century came from vital records, sometimes from the lists of parishioners, etc., etc. In 18th century, most of the peasants' surnames were not shaped. So sometimes you can find the records with only names, and you don't know how to connect it to your genealogical tree. So for some lines, I reached the half of the 18th century.
Mm-hmm. And that's, is it fair to say that it's still work in progress, that who knows what more you can find?
Yes, my research is quite complicated, because I came to Białystok from Gorzów Wielkopolski. This is the city near the western border of Poland. Before the Second World War, it belonged to Germany. And all of my grandparents came from different parts of Poland, even from Belarus. So I have to skip from place to place to search for the ancestors. And I still have to do some research in Belarus and in southern Poland. I think you have to have time to do it. So I systematically plan my next steps, and it takes a long time.
It takes a while. And can you tell us maybe a little bit more about what you can find in the Polish archives? Because there's a bit of a myth, I think, when people that have immigrated or ancestors, that their ancestors immigrated, it's often said that Poland doesn't have any records, and that's of course not true. But if you could give us a brief outline of what type of documents you can potentially find in Poland, and where are they? Where are they kept? How can you access documentation in Poland?
There are two main types of archives in Poland: the state archives, which are very well organized, and all of the documents which are kept by these archives, you can find information about in the internet or on the internet. Of course, most of the documents are not digitized, except for vital records. But if you have information, you can access these documents. There are, of course, limits. For example, for birth records, you cannot get documents which are not older than 100 years. For marriage and death records, not older than 80 years. There are also some limits for civil documents, like notary or court documents. You cannot access them if these documents are not older than 50 years. But all of the rest is accessible. The second type of archives are the church archives, and every archive is different. So for in some archives, the access to the documents is quite easy. In some of them, it does not look this way. In some of the archives, you can make copies or possess copies of the records. In some of the archives, it's not possible. You can only transcript the documents and give this information to the customers. Of course, some vital records are also accessible in parish archives, because not all of the parishes transfer the vital records to the church archives or to the state archives. So, but in fact, most of the information you would like to get, if exists, it's possible to obtain. Except for vital records, I am working with notary records, with civil records, which are kept by the state archives, with press articles, lists of people, citizens, if exists. So there are many different types of documents you can check to obtain the information. The most important is that the state archives in Poland are very well organized, and the information about the records which exist you can get from the internet.
So that's music to our ears. But what you describe is actually creative pursuit as well, because you have to be, I guess, very curious and creative about where you're going to look. And I was going to ask you about Polish minorities. So we, for example, work a lot with Jewish people, potentially people that have German heritage or Russian heritage. I mean, the borders shifted, and even in your own family, from Gorzów Wielkopolski to Białystok, that's, I don't know, 500 kilometers, maybe more. How do you go about finding records for religious minorities, for ethnic minorities? Where are the sources of information for that?
Most of these documents are kept by the state archives in Poland. For example, in regard to Jews, the best database of what is possible to find is JewishGen portal. This gives you the information if, for example, vital records for a given place exist or not, because it has to be understood that for many places in Poland, the vital records of Jewish communities don't exist today, because they were lost during the Second World War. But this gives you the idea what can be found and where. But JewishGen does not have information on all the records which can be found in Poland. So the rest of the work you have to do by yourself to locate these documents. Some of the documents of Jewish communities in Poland are kept by the archives in the other countries, because before the Second World War, Poland had a much different shape in regarding to borders than it has today. So you have to sometimes to look for the documents in different countries, not only in Poland. And regarding the other minorities, like Lutherans, for example, most of the documents you can find in the state archives. Sometimes very helpful is the contact to the main Berlin Lutheran archive, which also has documents from Poland. No, every case is different. So for every case, you have to first identify the place and the archive which can have the documents for a given place. So this is the beginning of the work.
Okay. And do you often get to go to the archives personally?
Sometimes, if, for example, you have the information about given records, you can order them from the archives. I go to the archives if I have to do the research on site, because it is much more efficient than to ask archivists. The waiting time for the research results from the archives is quite long, and sometimes not so effective than if you do it by yourself. So if I have to do the research, the real research, not that I have only one record to get, I go to the archive for the research.
So can you describe what it looks like? So the archives would have a reading room, and you can actually physically go, and they will give you a particular book of births or you know, some records, and you can what can you do? Can you take photos, or can you take notes, or what happens?
In the state archives, you can make photos. In the church archives, it depends on the archive. Sometimes you can take photos. Sometimes you can order the copies. Sometimes you can only transcribe the content of the record and give this information to the customer without any copy. You go to the it's good to prepare to your visit, because the time of work during a day is limited. Some church archives work only 4 hours a day. The state archives work 8 hours a day. It is not a long time, so it is good to prepare the list, the documents you want to check, and then you go and order these documents from the archive. During pandemic, it's a little bit complicated, because the number of seats in the state archives is limited, and it is required to set up the visit before, and not every kind of documents is accessible. I mean the hard copy documents. For example, inventories are not accessible. You have to ask the archivist to check for you the list of documents to order. If something is online, you can check it online, but you cannot take it the inventory by yourself.
Okay, and I was also going to ask you if you can remember the strangest thing that you've ever found in the archives. Can you think of anything that was really bizarre or surprising or strange?
There were many such different cases, but I can remind something which happened this year. I was researching the roots of Jewish family currently in US, but with origins in Białystok. And I collected many documents for this family in different archives, not only in Białystok, but also in Płock, in Ukraine, in Wrocław. But there was very limited information about the girls, sisters of my customer's ancestor. And one of the documents which I was requested to check after many months of research was to check the military records in Białystok State Archive. So I found one case among these documents in regard of one of the brothers of my customer's ancestor. And when I took these documents, I found the revision list from 1884, if I remember well at the moment, with the list of 3 generations of this family, together with the dates of birth of all the girls we wanted to have. So it was kind of the treasure, familial treasure in military records, not vital, not notaries, but in military records you can find such things. So sometimes it is good to check not only the obvious documents, but something which seems rather not probable for research, that anything can be found inside.
So I think, Daniel, what you're describing is a matter of luck as well as diligence. So you can try for years and years, and then something happens and you discover a treasure trove of information that you wouldn't expect to be in a particular place or in a particular document. So that's really, really interesting. But in terms of your own work, Daniel, apart from genealogical research, you also do tours, and you also help people reconnect with their missing family members. Is that right? Well, not so much missing, but you know, like there may be a gap of a couple of generations, and people might be searching for family members in Poland. That's another thing you do for people. Is that right?
Yes, that's right. These tours are the private tours. So for the customers who want to come to Poland and visit the places the ancestors lived, or to look for the living relatives, it's possible. Not this year. This year it was because of pandemic, it was impossible. But I can still look for the living relatives on site without the tour. So. Yes, what can I say else about it? This experience?
So what I was going to ask you firstly about privacy, because Poland and Europe's got such strict privacy regulations. So can you actually contact people if you suspect that they are related to your clients, or what happens in practice?
Yes, Poland and Europe has the private regulations, so you cannot get the information about people from the officials, from authorities. Mm-hmm. So what I do, the most efficient way is to go to the site, to the village, and talk to people. People are very, in many cases, most cases, people are very friendly and want to help you. Sometimes, if, for example, you know that the family lived in given village, but you cannot find any information about this surname because after many wars, people emigrated or changed the location. So sometimes it's impossible to find anything, especially if you look for the people who lived there more than 100 years before. You go to the cemetery, or we go to the cemetery and leave the flyers on the gravestones with hope that someone will call and give us the additional information. So there are many ways, but the most important is to contact with people, with living people in village. Sometimes when I don't go to the site because the customer wants me to make first the research by phone or by internet, I call to different people, to different organizations, and try to get the information this way.
Mm-hmm. So the hallmark of a good researcher is definitely being well organized, being creative. What's the third one? What does a researcher have to have? What's the third key feature of your work?
You have to like it. Because if you have to have luck, of course. Sometimes.
Yes, that's the fourth one.
Let me recall one of the experience with living relatives research. I made the research for one lady before the tour, and during the tour she was very interested to find the family who wrote letters to her grandfather after the Second World War from Poland to US. And this family sent letters from Białystok. Białystok is quite a big city, and you know, it's not easy to talk to people in Białystok, which has about 300,000 citizens. It's not so easy like going to the village, which has 1,000 people, and ask
everybody
about
knows
information.
Each other, yeah. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. But I had the photos which this family from Poland sent to US after the war. And I found in the internet information about one of the teachers of the same surname who arranged the museum of local teachers in his private house before his death. And after his death, these photos were passed to the local museum. I asked for these photos, and I found him as a teacher on one of the photos from after the war, and I compared it with this photo of the family which was sent to US. This family photo had him as a small child. I had him as a teacher.
Wow.
So from the internet, I know his birth date and the birthplace. The next step of research was to find his relatives. I knew where and when he died, and after researching this local city, I found his sister. And first day of our tour was visiting his sister in a totally different place, not in Białystok. Mm-hmm. During the meeting, she told us that 20 years ago she was in US and tried to contact this family, but the telephone book had so many entries with the same surname that she resigned. So it was the meeting after 20 years. I don't have to tell that it was very, very poignant and impressive for yeah.
Emotional. I can imagine. So you know, that luck factor and also persistence is definitely something that must feature in your work a lot. Look, we have a lot of questions and only 6 minutes, so I'm going to hand over to Andrea. This session's been extremely popular, so that's good. But of course, people can contact you if they require your services or want more information. But I'll hand over to Andrea for some questions, if that's okay. Andrea, over to you.
Thank you so much. I have a question here from Donna. She's saying, I'm trying to get a birth certificate of my grandfather. All the sites I go to are confusing and most don't interpret to English. What would you suggest?
you can send the information if you choose. You can send the information to me, and I will check if it's possible to find it. And
yes, so Daniel will be happy
we'll
to assist in this instance, just to see what we can, because there's obviously the language barrier for a lot of people who do not speak Polish. But I think if I can offer a bit of advice, is that you need to be persistent and creative, and we're more than happy to help. So feel free to contact us as well.
Can you give the web address for the state archives?
It's maybe
Is it
should I spell it?
Because we'll put it in the name. .pl, yeah.
Yeah, it's but Szukaj w archiwach. There are two web pages: the old one and the new one. The new one now has all the information is in the new one, and the old one will not have the new entries. If any documents are added to the database, it will be not shown in the old web page. So the correct one is szukajwarchiwach.gov.pl.
We'll put that spelled out in the link after the session. But what Daniel was explaining, actually, I went last summer with my colleague Dorota. I went to a genealogical conference when they were talking about the new website taking over, and all the genealogists hated the new one because of the research functions, or search functions, I should say. So both of them are still in existence, the old one and the new one. The new one's a bit harder to navigate, I think, but we'll put them up on the Facebook page when we're done.
Can I add a word? I also hated
Please.
The new one, and I didn't use it. But last month I had to find the information, and I didn't find it in the old one. And I found it in the new one, and the state archives informed on the website that the new one was improved. So it's much easier now to
navigate. And it does have an English language version, so you still need to be very patient with the website, I think, but it's just a matter of persistence and trying different things on any of the research website, I guess. All right, Andrew.
Thank you. Do you think it's necessary to have a contact person in Poland to do the research for someone?
If you don't have experience with Poland, with the research in Poland, it's good to have it. But people with many years of experience with copying Polish archives maybe can do it by themselves. But for the beginners or for people who are not from here, it's good to have the local contact.
And I would also suggest to start with your Australian or American or whatever documents, because they often have a lot of clues. Like sometimes the names might be misspelled, but if you read, kind of between the lines, and if you put it all together, that can give you a lot of clues to make that research later in Poland a bit easier.
Thank you so much. Someone just added that perseverance is something that is key for research, to look for documents about your family history. Do you think that's correct, Daniel?
Yes, I think I think this is correct.
Definitely, patience, time, and also curiosity. One of the things that Daniel mentioned is that in his job, one of the components is the love, the passion, the curiosity. And I think if you start on that journey for your own family, some people it's an obsession, even, I would say, where they spend many hours, many years on piecing it all together. And it depends how far you want to go, and depends what you want to discover. But I think if you're passionate about it, it's a very good pursuit. It's a very good hobby as well, and you do learn a lot more about your family and history as well, because it does give you all the historical background to your family's generations that you can discover through research.
Thank you so much.
And the patience. Okay.
Go, Danny.
I think also patience is very important, because in many cases you have to wait for the documents, wait for the information from someone you called to, wait for the email from someone you wrote to. So this is not the activity for 1 or 2 days. Sometimes you wait for the information.
Exactly.
Thank you. And one more question I have. What is that one thing, Daniel, that you think people or someone needs to have when they want to get started with the genealogical research about their family? Is there that one thing they have to have?
They have to collect the initial information. It's very important for genealogy researcher to know where to start. So if you have the place where your ancestors came from, or the dates are very important. The parents' names, because sometimes you can have the people who have very similar surnames and names, and without parents' names, it would be very difficult to locate the right documents. So as detailed initial information you can collect, it's best for the research.
That's a very, very good point, and it's a very good information for anyone that's just about to start. But I think generally speaking too, if you can collect everything and analyze it and organize it, that's also very helpful. And if you are stuck, if you really want to find records in Poland and you don't know how to go about it, do contact Daniel. We have had really, really good experience with Daniel. He is all of what we describe: patient, persistent, curious, and he loves his job. So we'll put his contact details and his website on the Facebook page. In the meantime, I wanted to thank you very much for your time. I know it's very early still in Białystok, and you did say that it snowed a couple of days ago, but it hasn't snowed in a few days. So coming up to Christmas, hopefully you do have a white Christmas here in Melbourne. It's the middle of summer, so you know, we never get used to having hot Christmas. It's a very strange thing. But I wanted, on behalf of Polaron, of the staff and everyone that you've worked with so far, to thank you for your time today, but also for all the hard work and dedication that you've shown working with our clients. And we're hoping to expand that and continue working together. So I'm just going to hand over just for the last few words. And thank you so much for your time this morning, this afternoon, Daniel.
Thank you very much for inviting me. Thank you very much for discussion, and thank you for all of you who participated in this event.
We had a lot of questions, and if we haven't answered the questions you've asked, feel free to reach out and grab us, and we'll do our best. So thank you, Daniel. Thank you, Andrea, and thank you everyone that's joined us this afternoon.